Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Steph, and if you're new here, I'm Steph. So around this time last year, I did a vlog called Do I Like Dark Academia? And I read 5 dark academia books that I had already owned. They were on my shelves. I did a little bit of research to figure out if they were classified as dark academia. And I read them and tried to figure out if I like it and if I even understand what dark academia is. The books that I ended up reading in part 1 were Bunny, Truly Devious, They Never Learn, Summer Suns, and Plain Bad Heroines. For the most part, I enjoyed everything that I read in that vlog, but I still felt like I didn't have a full grasp on what dark academia was by the end of it. My definition of dark academia comes from a place of wanting a book to be set in a classroom where you see them learning, you're kind of learning with them, you see them struggling through their academics, but also there's some sinisterness to it, right? There's probably students vying for similar positions, and so they do really horrible things to one another. There's probably murder that takes place. But at the core of it, I always feel like dark academia should be critiquing academia. When I read those 5 books, I felt like that really wasn't the case. There were some aspects in which I expected from dark academia that did happen, but for the most part, like, it was just murder. And I decided that I wanted to try again and try to figure out if dark academia is for me, but do it with a few books that I've heard have more of a school setting involved. So in part 2 of Do I Like Dark Academia, I'm going to be reading these 5 books. So we have Vita Nostra, which is a translated fiction, so I'm very excited about this, and I believe the second one is supposed to be coming out pretty soon. I have a few friends who have given this 5 stars and say that it is just an intense and weird time, and I love weird books. I feel like this one's gonna be the bunny of the group because in the last vlog, Bunny was a ride. Then we have These Violent Delights. This one is supposed to be about an obsession between these 2 boys. It is also exploring social commentary from what I know. So I'm very interested in this one because the obsession part I think will be really interesting. Then we have For Your Own Good. So this one is similar to They Never Learn in the sense that this is actually following a teacher. I think that he's a college professor at a pretty Ivy League school, and he just does not believe that his students deserve what they have. So he kind of sabotages them. I'm not sure who it was, but somebody gave this the tagline of a mashup between Dexter and You by Carolyn Kepnes. So and then we have Atlas 6, which I'm so interested to see how I feel about this one because I have heard nothing but polarizing reviews for it and I'm nervous, but this is supposed to be like about a secret society and they're kind of learning about their magical abilities. I love stuff with magic involved, so I'm very excited about this. The one book in here that I believe will be the dark academia of my dreams, and I think that most people can agree with this, is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I am very, very excited about this. I only know that this is supposed to be set in the 1800s. It is a major critique on colonization and the Industrial Revolution, and there's supposed to be a sprinkle of magic in it. I have heard from Monty that this definitely isn't like as magical as people probably have thought going into it. So I am adjusting my expectations, but I'm still very, very excited about this. I really enjoyed The Poppy War when I read it. I think this will be vastly different, but I feel like I'm gonna love it. Don't hold me to it, but I just have a really good feeling. So hopefully in this round of reading Dark Academia, I will come to some understanding of Dark Academia, but also maybe what I really like in Dark Academia. I have high hopes that at least of this stack of 5, 3 of them will become like new favorite books. Okay, so I'm on sprints with Erin and I'm reading For Your Own Good. Oh my god. There's been a twist that just happened that I'm so ready for. I'm so ready for it. Also, this man is just drinking so much whole milk, just big old glasses of whole milk, and that is the most unbelievable part of this whole book because why? Big glass of whole milk? Hate it. I am really enjoying this book. Our main character is so unhinged, and it was the unhinged energy that I didn't know that I needed because I'm having a really great time. So I finished For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing, and this was ridiculous. I know I gave you a brief synopsis in the beginning when I first was picking this up of what I thought this was about, but I was slightly wrong, but also slightly not wrong. So this is about a teacher who believes that he knows what's best for his students, but he also likes to teach his students a lesson, especially if they're wealthy and come from a prestigious family. He especially likes to teach those kids a lesson. So in the very beginning of the book, you actually learn that he wrote a letter of reference for a student that he hated, he despised, and absolutely did not think she was deserving of getting into any Ivy League schools. So he wrote a letter of reference that was just terrible, talking about how she was a horrible student and she wasn't a team player, sent it directly off to the schools, and she ended up losing everything. Like, she didn't get into any of the schools that she applied to, and she was having trouble getting a job. And she finally figured out what had happened, that our main character Teddy is the reason for her demise, basically. And so she writes him emails all the time about how he's a horrible person, and it's really funny actually, because he thinks it's funny, but also what she says is funny. So he's definitely trying to teach students a lesson. The thing I was wrong about was I thought this was set in college. This is set in high school. He works at a high school, like a private high school where a lot of rich students go to and they get into Ivy League colleges, you know, like a little Chilton moment. If you don't know what Chilton is, it's from Gilmore Girls. It's the school that Rory Gilmore goes to. Like, the school setting itself very much gave me Chilton vibes, but then it gave me Pretty Little Liars vibes as well, because I feel like in Pretty Little Liars, you see a lot of the parent-student interaction, especially with Spencer's character. So the school setting and like the things the students were going through really gave me the vibes of a combination of Chilton from Gilmore Girls and then whatever the school is called in Pretty Little Liars. It just very much had those vibes. Our main character is so unhinged. He is like if Joe Goldberg had a teaching credential. He is just wild, because a lot of what he's doing, he kind of knows it's wrong, but he also is like, but I'm helping them in the long run. It's for their own good. And I'm like, sir. Anyway, I had a lot of fun with this book. I do think there are parts of it where things go off the rails and it becomes very unbelievable and messy, and I was like, there's no way I can suspend my disbelief for what is happening right now, but I'm having a fun time. So I would give this a 3.5 stars, probably rounded up to a 4 stars. I just had a really good time. I definitely want to read more by Samantha Downing. I know that, I think it's My Lovely Wife. Yeah, I know that My Lovely Wife is very popular. People really love that book. I think it's most people's favorite books by Samantha Downing, so I would definitely read more. In terms of the dark academia part, I think it's really funny because I unintentionally, in part 1 and now part 2, have read books that are from the teacher's perspective for the most part. Now, there is different perspectives in here that are from different teachers or from different students that go to the school, but for the most part, this is all surrounding a teacher at a prestigious school. And in part 1, I had read They Never Learn, which again has a very similar vibe to this book actually. I think Teddy's is more petty, and the main character in They Never Learn, hers, it feels a little bit different, but definitely the same unhinged vibe. And it's interesting because they both do this thing where both of the teachers in both of these books are vying for different positions that they want, and by doing that, they're kind of backstabbing other people, which when I think of dark academia, I always feel like there's supposed to be books that are critiquing the education system, especially elite, wealthy people within the education system and how it's in their favor, as well as talking about the backstabbing and the lengths that people go to secure these positions. Like, when I think of dark academia, I definitely think of that, and I think in the last vlog, I felt that the majority of the dark academia books that I read didn't really fit that at all, and I do think the closest one was They Never Learn, because she was trying to backstab other people to get to a higher position. Teddy is doing the same thing to try to be the headmaster, and I think that's really interesting because this kind of twists my idea of dark academia, where I think it's usually focused on the students, and in this book they're really focusing on the students having a hard time with their parents pushing them to do things that maybe they don't really want to do, or pushing them into elite schools that they aren't really interested in going to. So I think so far, For Your Own Good actually hits more of the marks of what I think dark academia is than a lot of the other books. And so that's another thing, right? Is in the last video, a huge thing was every single one of the books, I'm pretty sure, all had murder and a mystery element, which I really love. I really like mystery books over thriller books, and so it's really fun in these books to have a mystery element to it. And this one, similar to They Never Learn, has a mystery element that's not super mysterious. Like, you pretty much know what's going on. So I definitely think, in comparison to all of the books I read last time and now the first book for this vlog, this is the closest I've gotten to what I believe dark academia is, but this is from the lens of a teacher. So the next book that I'm gonna start is Atlas 6. And to be honest, I don't actually know that much about the synopsis of Atlas 6. I just know that there are supposedly 7 characters that are vying for these 6 different positions, which I think is why it's called Atlas 6. Otherwise, I just know that it is partially magical, fantastical, and it is supposed to fit under dark academia. So that is what I'll be reading next.
Take care of me, but fair warning, I take more than I give normally. Make tea with honey, but I hope you see I'm in a bubble and not always loving. I am a bee, but I'll try not to sting. Oh, I am a bee, and I'm not always loving.
Good morning. I haven't been sleeping well. I've had a migraine for days, and I'm also doing this like thing in my personal life where I'm trying not to spend money on random shit because I have a tendency to do that. So I try to do everything at home, and I'm not buying books, and it's really hard because I'm really obsessed with the Starbucks caramel apple macchiato, but I have yet to figure out how to do that one at home. I need to keep looking up recipes. I haven't seen a dupe for it that like looks good, but you know what I do have? I have pumpkin puree, so I'm gonna make a pumpkin spice latte because I think it'd be fun.
To stay. Oh, I am a bee. I am not always loving. Try not to stay. Oh, I am a bee, and I'm not always loving.
Hello, I finished Atlas 6 and I didn't give you any updates because I kind of just read it. But also, I've been feeling down. I've been feeling really down, depressed lately, one could say. So I haven't really felt like being on camera. But I'm gonna go to Target because I have to pick up some house stuff anyway. And I'm gonna see if they have their fall decorations there and maybe treat myself to something to make myself feel better. But at the very least, they have a Starbucks in there and I can get a seasonal drink. So we're gonna go do that, and I'm gonna talk to you in the car about the Atlas 6. So obviously I didn't update you in the car about the Atlas 6, but that's mainly because when I got into the parking lot, it was much busier than I thought it would be at 9 o'clock in the morning at a Target. They did end up having some Halloween stuff, but not really anything else that I was interested in that I didn't already have, but they had a mug. And if you know me, you'll know that I'm obsessed with mugs to an unhealthy degree. Like, I see a mug and I just want it. I don't know why. I mean, despite the fact that I do drink tea every morning, like I still can't justify the amount of mugs that I buy. But as I'm saying this, I'm holding a new one. It's a little cauldron, which I think is very cute. I do wish the spider web was on like these two sides because you hold the mug this way, but like I still had to get it because I've always wanted a cauldron mug. I wish you could see Olive right now, but I really don't want to move the camera. Plus, she'll probably be scared of the camera. Oh, but I have my phone. Getting back to the reason we are all here, Atlas 6. My final rating for this would be like a 3 stars, maybe a 3.5. I wasn't obsessed with this book, but I also didn't hate it. Like there were parts where I was really invested in it, and then there were other parts where I was a little frustrated about the structure of this book. So the main premise of this is that you have 6 magicians who are some of the most powerful magicians in the world and of their age. And this man named Atlas comes and finds them and asks them if they want to be in this very prestigious and renowned Society of Alexandria, which is in the Alexandrian Library. All 6 of the characters that you follow have accepted Atlas's invitation, and they go into the society for various reasons. They all have different talents that are unique to themselves, and you learn about their talents and you learn about kind of why they've accepted this position a little bit throughout the book. But most of all, you learn that only 5 can remain of the 6. And it's unknown what will happen to the 6th person when they leave the society and what their life will look like after that. But you just kind of know that they're sort of competing against each other. Obviously, when you have 5 of 6 people staying, they're not super competitive. So the things that I liked about this book, I really enjoyed the learning aspects, and when they're in the society and you're going through each perspective and they're all kind of doing different things to learn and study about this secret society, but also about their own abilities and how that can be manifested and changed and manipulated, and how their powers can kind of grow. Like I've said time and time again, my ideal dark academia is where you're actually in the classroom and you're learning with them. Even if you don't really understand what's happening, I just love the aspect of being in the classroom and like the parts of when they're studying and they're actually feeling the pressure of academics. I mean, I'm sure that comes from a place of someone who loves learning, and I really loved the process of learning when in school. I didn't necessarily love school itself, but I love learning. And so being inside the classroom and learning with characters has always been my favorite thing. That's also something I really love in fantasies as well, is when you're learning about the magic system with the character. And I really liked the description of place and this society and the Alexandrian Library. Like I really enjoyed learning about those things. So there's a lot to like about this, and I think you could get obsessed with the characters, but the problem I have is I think that it was made very clear who was the most important characters. So it felt useless to be in the other characters' perspectives. And as a matter of fact, I did feel like some of the characters were easily switched in the story. Like you could switch the names and some of the personality traits and you wouldn't know the difference. I feel like Libby, Nico, and Parisa are like the most well-fleshed characters in the story. And I don't fully have a problem when there are obvious characters who take importance in this plot. But it's like, why are we following all 6 of them if we clearly have a few that are more important, you know? Because I didn't feel like all 6 of them were pushing the plot forward. That is actually not my biggest problem with this book. My biggest problem with this book is the ending, because it felt like this whole book led up to this big reveal at the end that kind of made me mad. If I would have had this reveal at the very beginning, I think this would have been a more enjoyable ride, to be honest. Like, I don't think that reveal was anything special. I don't think it was anything like shocking by any means. It felt like a reveal that you could have seen coming, and honestly, I wish I would have known it from the beginning. And the structure of this was a little bit different, because if you'd known that from the beginning, it would have been a much more interesting dynamic, and it would have been more interesting to see how the characters interact with certain people when you know some of these things, because there was enough going on that this reveal didn't make this book like, oh my god. So I will probably read the second one because I am semi-interested in where this is going, but I feel like the ending, not just the reveal, but like even the very end before you get the big twist, kind of started to take a turn that I wasn't really enjoying. I didn't enjoy where it was going. It lost me a bit. I don't hate it and I don't love it. It's not my new obsession, but I had a lot of fun reading it. It had its problems, it had its flaws, but I didn't hate it. Hi, good morning. So I'm listening to Vita Nostra and I'm maybe like 15% into it. And I just wanted to say that there is no way that you could ever get me to do anything for a strange man and some gold coins. And I just don't understand why this character is going along with it. She's under the impression that if she doesn't do the tasks that are asked of her, that this guy who's asking them of her will do something to her family. But so far he's only done something possibly, coincidentally, to a guy that her mom is kind of seeing who's married to another woman. And I'm like, let the man suffer. Anyway, that's just me, you know? But I am having fun with this book because it's weird. Because I would never, ever, I mean, she talked to the man. I wouldn't even have gone that far. Hello, it's Friday. And I have my silly little drink. And I have my silly little book. And I have my silly little depression. And all I want to do is lay on the couch and finish this book. You know, Fridays are supposed to be like my productive days because it's my day off during the week and no one's here at my house. And like, I don't usually make plans on Fridays. I normally like will film and edit and clean, and I don't want to do any of that. I am halfway through Vita Nostra, and this is a weird book, but I'm really liking it. I think I thought I would be too stupid for this book, just because like there are so many books out there where the weird is mixed with like super intelligence. I kind of think of like Gideon the Ninth, where it's just too smart for me to fully comprehend and fully grasp, which isn't always the best reading experience, and I don't always love that reading experience, but I'm actually really enjoying this because it's not as hard to grasp as I thought it would be. But this I'm really, really enjoying. I've been enjoying it from the beginning, even though I will say, like, the idea of this random man interacting with this girl, it couldn't be me, but there have been some revelations since the update where I talked about how this wouldn't happen to me. I wouldn't fall victim to this, but you do start to see that there's a bigger impact for their failure to do certain things in this book. So I can see why people stick with it or like get sucked into this situation. So Vita Nostra follows a girl named Sasha, and when she's on vacation with her mother, she meets the mysterious man that I mentioned before, and he tells her to do this task. The first task is to go basically skinny dipping in the ocean every morning at 4 a.m. And every time she does it, she throws up gold coins. And then he asks her to run every morning at like 4 or 5 in the morning until she can no longer run. And again, she throws up gold coins until she has enough coins. I think it's like 374 coins, and she's admitted to this mysterious college. She doesn't know anything about it, but again, she doesn't want to refuse because she's afraid of the consequences. She ends up going to the school. She meets a lot of other people who were in similar situations. Some were a bit different, but mostly it was similar situations, and they don't know what they're studying. They have no idea really why they're there, why they've been chosen, and they just do the tasks because most of them are afraid of what will happen if they don't do the tasks and like if they fail things. And so I don't know what page I'm on. I'm on page 218. I think this is a little over 300. Oh, this is 403 pages. At this point, you're already in their second year at this institute. So I don't know how long this book will span because I was under the impression that there's more in this series. They just haven't been translated yet. So it'll be interesting to see how many years this ends up spanning and like what the future of this series would hold. I don't know what it is about this story that just keeps me absorbed. I think it's the narration style and kind of how the book is set up. So there's no chapters in here and you kind of could just keep going and going and going and things just sort of flow into the next thing. And even the time passing doesn't feel like it's passing as quickly as it actually is. There's just something really unique and absorbing about this book that I'm really enjoying, but I don't think that I'm fully grasping everything that's happening in here, and I don't know that you're meant to because a lot is being held back from the main character. I'm just so curious where this is going and how this particular book is going to end, but yeah, I think I'm just going to lay around for a while and read this, maybe play a little Animal Crossing.
to say. Ain't no particular reason, just hit by your wave. Maybe I'll grab a cup of coffee and listen to our favorite song. I'm such an idiot, I'm pathetic, thought I was moving on. I don't want anybody, I want you. I miss your olive skin, I miss my muse. So if you wanna find me, make a move. I'll send a telepathic message with my coordinates say.
I finished Vita Nostra and I have no idea how to talk about this to you. It's funny how similar part 1 and part 2 of this Dark Academia vlog are, because when I read Bunny, I was just like, what the fuck did I just read? I don't know how to explain it to you. I don't know how to give you my feelings about it. All I can tell you is this feels like a 4 stars, but I also just don't even know if I loved it or hated it. Like, it was a wild ride. It felt very much like Bunny in that sense. But that's really only where the comparisons lie with it. I mean, other than it being Dark Academia and stuff like that, the comparisons to Bunny and this are far and few between. This is just super weird, and I had a really good time reading it, but I also was confused for a majority of it. And when I felt like I had a grasp on what was going on, then the ending happened, like the ending quarter, when you kind of start to figure stuff out and like why they're at this school. I still had a really good time though. I was very absorbed in this book. I think I read it in a day and a half. I was very absorbed in this book. I kind of thought it would be one of those books where I wouldn't have a good time because it was so confusing, but it's not confusing in the aspects of like what the book is trying to do. It's confusing because the character doesn't even know what she's doing all of this for. Like, if you have a character who doesn't even know why she's doing the things she's doing, but she knows that she wants to do them and she feels called to this thing, then it's going to be confusing for you as the reader, because your one source of understanding this book doesn't even understand what she's doing. So it wasn't like it was going over my head and I was feeling stupid. It was like, wow, I really want to figure this out with this character. And I'm not saying the reveal is going to be satisfying for everybody. As a matter of fact, the ending just it's a cliffhanger basically, and I feel bad for the people who read this translated version, because I think it came out a few years ago, and it came out in 2013. That's when it was translated. Yeah, it was translated in 2013. And the second one, which I don't even know if the second one actually completes this series, because from what I understand, one of the authors passed away. Point being, 2013, you're picking this up thinking you're gonna have a jolly good time, and then you get that ending and you have to wait until the second one is translated, which, by the way, isn't gonna be till March 2023. So like, good for me, but wow. At the same time, it could have just been interpreted as just an open ending, and like, I'm usually cool with open endings, but I knew there was more in this. I weirdly feel like, despite the fact that the academics that they're studying are something that we don't understand, and something that is in theory not relatable, I do feel like the pressure that they were feeling doing the tests, the environment that they're in, like the setting they're in, is so relatable to college, and you really felt that throughout this, and you felt the growing pains. Like, they go through 3 years of college, and it's just so interesting how things change for them. The only thing I'll say about this though is the men in here are garbage. They are hot fire garbage, because there was some questionable consent moments happening with one character, and then there's another character who just like, please. I feel like Sasha needs to give up on men. And quite frankly, I want to know who wrote the men characters in here. Which one of y'all did it? Yeah, I feel like this is, again, another book that I think will be polarizing. I think that people will go into this and hate it, with all of their being, and then there's gonna be people who just like love it and they don't know why. And I feel like I fall into that category, and a few people I talked to when they saw I was reading this book also fell into that category. It's really hard to talk about any of my feelings about this book because all of my feelings are in relation to the spoilery parts, just because of how ambiguous things are in here. The things I have the most visceral feelings on, besides the trash men in here, and I really liked our main character, are spoilery. So all I know is I feel in my heart that this is a 4 stars, but I kind of want to sit on that rating for a little bit and see how I feel in a few days, or maybe when I finish this vlog.
Right where you left me, impatiently waiting. The rest of my day went to shit. Wrote a song, but no one's listening to it. It's only times like these when I want you back in my room. Make me feel wanted and a little less confused, 'cause I'm swimming laps across the map.
Good morning, friends. I wanted to show you that Skeletoni got an update. If you don't know who Skeletoni is, you're about to find out. Skeletoni is now surrounded by frickin' bats. Okay, now that we're up to date on the important information, I wanted to let you know that I am about halfway through These Violent Delights. I'm on part 3, and I'm really liking this, but mainly because it's making me feel so uncomfortable. I went into this book for some reason expecting something a little bit different, but something about it just keeps me sucked in. It's sort of like Vita Nostra, where I feel like I can't look away from this train wreck that I know is just about to explode into something wild. So there are 2 boys in here named Julian and Paul, and they're 17, but they are so smart that they skipped grades. So they're in college, they meet in a college classroom, and they have a relationship that is just obsession. They are obsessed with each other, but their obsession is borderline like wanting to control each other. So really the obsession is bred from a place of wanting to have control over one another. And that obsession makes you feel extremely uncomfortable. Like, there are specific scenes in here that make me feel so uncomfortable. If you've read this, the camping scene, the scene with Julian's parents was uncomfortable, and I'm sure there's going to be even more, because in the beginning of this book, you already know that a murder has happened, that Julian and Paul murder somebody. That is literally the prologue of this book. Before you even open into Paul's perspective, you find out that they killed somebody. And so it is just a downward spiral of how they've gotten there. And I can't look away. Like, I need to know how they got here, why they chose this specific person, if this person has any significance to them. I think this is the perfect example of a book where the main character is a very unreliable narrator, because while it's not first person, it's technically all from Paul's perspective. You're always following Paul and his assumptions about Julian. And Paul is very insecure, and I'm sure Julian is as well, but you're not in his head, so it doesn't feel the same. But Paul is very insecure, and he is constantly going back and forth between this idea that Julian hates him and Julian loves him. And especially when he believes that Julian hates him, it's really bad. It's bad for everybody, pretty much. This is a book that people are either gonna love or they're gonna hate. I don't know that you can have an in-between with this because of the nature of this book. I don't know how I feel. I feel like I love it and I can't look away, and it's made me feel so many feelings, primarily uncomfortable, but like I can't, I don't know. This is definitely a different ride than I thought it was going to be. There is still a lot of social commentary. There is a lot of commentary on queerness, because this is set in the 70s, and a lot of the characters surrounding our 2 main characters have issue with their relationship. So you get a lot of commentary about that, specifically from Paul, but you also get to see how other people view their relationship. And there's social commentary. There's a lot of social commentary on, at least so far, medical practices. I feel like that's gonna go somewhere, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm gonna keep reading this because I need to finish it today. I have like a little over 200 pages, and I feel like I have to finish today. I just finished These Violent Delights, and I reread the ending of this 8 different times. My mind, Micah's mind. It's moments like this when you read a book and you realize you could never do what this author did. Like, it is so smart. It was so smart. Okay, I need to go watch like 72 videos that explain this book to me and talk to a few people who have read this book because, wow. Hi, so it's been a few days since I finished These Violent Delights. I needed a little bit of time to think about it and like talk to a few people about this book and look up a million reviews and discussions, especially about the ending, because I read this ending like 8 times, and the first time it went over my head, and then I started to understand what that ending was, and this book blew my mind. I think this is my favorite book I've read so far. And if I'm honest with you, I actually read them in the order I thought that I would enjoy them. I was saving These Violent Delights and Babel for the end because I thought that I would enjoy them the most, which I think is going to be the case because this by far is my favorite of the ones that I've read. I don't think I could give it a solid 5 stars. I feel like this is a 4.5 stars, mainly because this is too long for what it is. I think the length of it really took away from parts of this book because the middle part really dragged. It felt unnecessary. If it wasn't there, I feel like it would have been a stronger book. That being said, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time because these 2 characters, there's something. They are so obsessive about each other, and not in a way of like, I'm so obsessed with you, I love you so much, but in a way of like, I'm so obsessed with you, I would murder for you. Like literally murder for you. I also think that the time frame for this book is really interesting because it is set in the early 70s, and when you follow Paul, his grandparents are described as being very progressive. They fought for desegregation, they were fighting for rights for other people, but when it comes to Paul possibly being gay, his family is not accepting at all. And despite him being in a progressive family, as they want to believe, they're just very much anti this idea that he would want to have relationships with men. So this book is very smart because it does pose a lot of like philosophical questions, moral questions. It questions white supremacy and the way that we hold up beliefs. So it does so much in the backdrop, but also it's a motivating factor for Paul and Julian for a lot of the things that they are deciding to do. But like I said, this has so many trigger warnings. I'm actually going to leave them in the description box because I think I would miss some if I told them to you, but I do feel like dark academia kind of implies that there's going to be a lot of dark shit happening, and this is by far no exception. If anything, I think this is probably one of the darkest dark academia books that I've read. Also, speaking of dark academia, one of the things that I always try to talk about after finishing one of these books is how I think it fits into dark academia. And I obviously have my own thoughts and opinions and feelings about what dark academia should be in my mind, just based off of what it's called. So do I think that this fits into my definition of dark academia? Yes. I think yes, in the fact that there's a lot of philosophical discussions. They do meet in a classroom. Some of their motivations are based off of education, trying to outdo each other in terms of who's the more intelligent one, who's the one that can get away with X, Y, and Z. So yes, I do think that it fits into my thoughts on dark academia in the sense that I always feel like it should be critiquing something, which I do think that's a very big part of this book. There's a lot of critiques just based off the themes that I mentioned before of critiquing white supremacy, homophobia, morals, philosophy. Like, I think that it does a really great job of interweaving those themes throughout the book. But on the other hand, this spends very little time in a classroom. You really only hear about their education every once in a while. It's sprinkled in. This is very much solely focused on attempted murder and an obsessive relationship. That all being said, I recently watched a video by the book Leo discussing dark academia, and she ends up breaking down dark academia into kind of 3 categories and explaining how dark academia became a theme within books. And when she broke it down and talked about the different themes and how there's 3 core themes of dark academia, things started to make a lot more sense to me about what dark academia is trying to do versus what my interpretation of dark academia is. I mean, I went into the last vlog basically admitting that I didn't fully know what it was, but I had a few ideas of what it should be just based on kind of what I've seen and also the fact that it says academia in the title of the genre. I'm gonna link that video down below. Obviously, I think that you should watch it. You should probably watch it now and then maybe finish this video or watch it after this video. I don't really know, whatever works for you. But I think that it's a great introduction to dark academia and it helped me really understand why the themes to me don't seem to fit with the idea that I have about dark academia. I think that the message that I got from that video overall is that while there are certain dark academia books that do the things that I interpret dark academia as, which is being in a classroom, actually learning, critiquing the academic system, while also critiquing different things about our society. Those things exist, and there are some dark academia books like that. I think a lot of people, you know, say that The Secret History is a book that does that. I have no interest in reading The Secret History, so I can't speak to whether or not that's true, but Babel was definitely one of those books that was considered a dark academia that does all the things that I perceive dark academia to be. But on the other hand, the majority of dark academia is supposed to be about an obsession of some sort, probably murder, and it is supposed to also have underlying critiques of things. Dark academia can have some of those themes, but in the long run, it's mainly just vibes. I think from my last video and partially this video, I have said that I feel like dark academia really is just vibes, but I still just desperately want a book that's more focused on the classroom, like getting the education, doing the work, you know? So I'm really hoping that I will get that with Babel or Babel. I've heard it both ways. Nervous that I'm hyping it up too much, but we are going to start this today. I am about to be 5 chapters into this. I'm in the middle of chapter 4, and I feel like this book is going to do something for me that no other book has ever done, and that's encapsulate the feeling of learning. And what I mean by that is I was in school for a very long time. While school was always really difficult for me for a lot of reasons, the one thing about school that I absolutely love is the process of learning. Being able to sit in a classroom and hear a professor speak about a subject that they're likely very educated on, or getting to hear other students' perspectives on something based off their lived experiences or their understanding of a subject because of X, Y, and Z. And I think the funny thing about this entire vlog and like leaving this book till last is that when I pick up dark academia, I'm always hoping that I'll get that feeling again, that I'll be reading a book and it'll give me the same feeling of sitting in a classroom and learning. And obviously, the more and more I research about dark academia, the more I find out that the themes are different than what I'm expecting of the genre. Point being is throughout this entire video and throughout the first video that I did about dark academia, I was always hoping to find a book that gave me the same feelings that this book is giving me. And I just feel like this is potentially a 5-star already, only 5 chapters in, just based on how it's making me feel. I'm halfway through Babel. Babel. Any way that you pronounce it, I'm halfway through it. And I'm really enjoying this book a lot. I'm having a really great time reading this. I'm really enjoying the writing style. I definitely think that R.F. Kuang poured her soul into this book and the writing is phenomenal. I just really like exploring these themes in here. I think that this is doing exactly what I want dark academia to do and what I find most dark academia books don't do or that they lack in doing, which is heavy critiques on the academic system. So if you didn't know, Babel is a dark academia. You're following a main character named Robin. Robin was born in a village in Canton, but cholera wiped out his entire family, so he was orphaned. And a professor from the UK named Mr. Lavelle comes to save him. and basically starts to educate him in different languages so that he can end up going to Oxford and be a Babel student, which are basically students who have a mastery in different languages, and these languages are used in their silver making, and their silver making is basically their form of magic. These languages bind certain things together and they can do specific things. It does a million different things. Basically, the silver working is the crux to how the UK has been able to become this empire and sustain their wealth to a degree. So in theory, this is supposed to be like an alternate history where we have this magical system of silver, but there's still colonization, and the history actually follows almost exactly what we've already seen and witnessed throughout history regarding colonization. And so my only critique is I feel as if history would significantly be altered if we had said magic system. And I'm not saying that colonization wouldn't have happened. I think that it would have happened very much so. And while it's altering things in here to some magnitude, the thing I think about a lot is I feel that it would be impossible to have such a magic system and for history to be so unchanged. And maybe that's a commentary in and of itself, but I do believe that colonization would have happened. I do believe that certain aspects of our history would still exist, because what this commentary is showing us is that greed is greed, no matter if it's in a magical form or in the form that we've already seen through history. Like, surely you would see some vast differences because of this magic system, because magic usually has consequences. So I am curious if in the last half of this book we'll see some of those changes or those consequences of a magic system. But other than seeing personal consequences with our characters with this magic system, we haven't really seen it in a historical context. But at the same time, it's hard for me to even critique that because this book is so brilliant and it's doing such interesting things with the characters and how they're interacting with this Ivy League school and their purpose within that Ivy League school, and the fact that despite their intelligence and despite everything that they're doing for this school and will continue to do for this school and this country that they live in, they're always going to be seen as lesser. This is definitely top tier dark academia. I am having a really good time. Well, I say a good time loosely because it's not really fun to read. It's actually a very devastating book.
Oh, why do you cry? Why do you cry? Do not fear, we've been here before, my dear. It's clear that we've made it this far. Now look where we are.
I think it's safe to say I have found my new favorite dark academia. I think besides my one critique about history remaining almost completely the same despite this magic system being in place, this is the perfect dark academia book that I have ever read and probably will ever read. I'm not really sure how I expected this to end, but I think it was the right ending for where the story was going and what these characters were going through and the decisions that these characters were making in the confines of their situations. I think one of the things about dark academia for me is that I don't necessarily always like the ending of dark academias. I think we see that in this video quite a few times, that the endings sort of bother me in dark academia books. There's a lot of discussion about colonization in here, about slavery, about racism, bigotry, and the Industrial Revolution is a big aspect of this, which makes complete sense considering the time period. But like I said, there is a magic system in here that I feel like should have affected these things a little bit differently, and you kind of see the effects of the magic system more towards the end than I think throughout this book. But otherwise, I just think that this did everything that I wanted from a dark academia. Like I've said many times in this video, I always feel like dark academia should be critiquing things. I've always been under the impression that dark academia is set in a classroom. It has a lot of critiques and messages regarding different social topics, but it especially is critiquing academia and who it benefits and who it excludes. And I think this does this perfectly, because the only reason that 3 of the characters in here are even given the opportunity to go to Oxford is because they have this ability to speak multiple languages that white people do not have access to. But essentially they're being used for their knowledge, and ultimately, where does that lead? So I just think that this does all of those things perfectly. Funny enough, I think I mentioned that I read these in the order that I thought that I would enjoy them, and I feel like I should have done a 5-star predictions video because I was correct. So just to recap, I'm giving Babel a 4.5 stars. I will probably round it up to 5 stars on Goodreads. I gave These Violent Delights a 4-star. Even though I really struggled with my rating for Vita Nostra, I do feel like this is a 4-star read for me because I'm still thinking about it days later, and I think it's something that I would really want to reread. I gave The Atlas 6 a 3.5 stars, and actually I gave For Your Own Good a 3.5 stars. It's actually really cool. I didn't hate anything in this video. There were just some things that were like, good. 3 stars, 3.5 stars to me is a good read. I didn't hate it. I didn't necessarily love it, and it's not going to be a new favorite, but I had a good time reading it. And 4 and 5 stars are usually, they're like some of my new favorite books. So I think that this went pretty good. I think the one thing that was much better for this video versus the last video that I did in terms of dark academia was that the majority, if not all of these, took place at some point in a classroom. Most of them were doing academics, or most of them were exploring academia in some way. I think the one, which interestingly enough is one of the top books for me, is These Violent Delights, doesn't really take place that heavily in the classroom, and they're not heavily doing academics. But this book, in ways, if you read this, these characters are kind of doing a social experiment, but like kind of with each other. There's a lot of messages in here. There's a lot of critiquing of social standards and behaviors, which again, as we know, is not necessarily the definition of dark academia. It's just what my brain thinks of when I think of dark academia. But even when we're following a teacher, we were in the classroom the majority of the time, and he was seeking to have a better position in his life, and he would stop at nothing to get that position. Interestingly enough, Atlas 6, while it doesn't necessarily take place in a classroom setting, they are in a learning environment, because most of them are in college, about to be in college, and this is almost like their entrance into college. So instead of going to college, they get into this society, but they are required to learn things and kind of hone in on their skills, their magical skills. So while it's not necessarily in a classroom that we would traditionally think of as a classroom, it still has very much a learning environment. And these two, these are the most in the classroom. You are learning with them. You are learning so much. Learning with them, you're studying with them, you're struggling with them, and it's not necessarily a good time. I mean, it's a good time reading it, and I had a blast, but it's not necessarily a good time for the characters, you know? That being said, I'm really glad that I gave more dark academia a second chance, because I have read a lot more dark academia than I thought that I had. When I first started reading for part 1 of this video, I had actually read like probably 4 or 5 dark academia books without knowing that they were classified as dark academia. And now I realize that like some of my favorite themes fit into the dark academia category, because people talk about The Raven Boys being dark academia, and this is one of my favorite series of all time. And obviously Ninth House, I actually read this right when it came out and I enjoyed it. I don't know if I'll ever do a part 3 to this, because I feel like I got what I wanted from the first video in this video, and can anything ever top Babel at this point? I don't really know. But if you've made it this far into the video, feel free to leave a skull or a candle or fall leaves as the emoji if you have nothing to say, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.